You know, I feel a tremendous amount of pressure here today for three reasons. One, you. You are engaged in a work that is so vital and so very important, and it's an honor to be able to share some thoughts with you that I hope, beyond hope, will be helpful. Second pressure is my wife is here, and I don't always get that opportunity. She'll be critiquing me later. That's a second less pressure, but still pressure. Third is we have a son who is a pediatrician who has just finished the equivalent of a fellowship in preventive medicine. And I will be accounting to him regarding what I've been able to share with you. He shared with me one of the things that he has done in his preventive medicine work has looked at all organizations that are engaged in preventive medicine for humanitarian reasons. And he shared with me that the Gates Foundation is one of those organizations that is doing just remarkable work that sticks with it until it's done. And so it's an honor to be here. I have a couple of commitments that I'd like to make to you today as we begin. One is I'm going to be candid and truthful. There's not enough time to not be, but that I hope it doesn't offend anyone. Because I'm going to tell you what I've seen in this world of learning. I've been around a long time, as you can see. And I entered graduate school in 1978, something like that. And I left graduate school. I focused on cognitive research, behavioral research, but also instructional design, and then measurement with some advanced training at the University of San Francisco in performance measurement. And so my life has been wrapped around the work that you're talking about, really. I have been working with hundreds of organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, government and non-government, and I've learned a few things I'm going to do my best to share with you. But I'll be candid. Secondly, my second commitment is I'm going to do my best to give you a couple of meaningful things that you can implement. But third, I'm going to be talking about performance support, which is how to help you take whatever it is that I share with you and then actually apply it, right? And I'm not going to get you to where I would like to get you to, but I'm going to give you some performance support, from this. But I'm also so want you to be able to take, if you desire, the things that I'm going to share with you, take them and apply them and make a difference in terms of the world that you're working in. That my commitment is that I'll give you a half a day of my time without charge to help you at any point implement or think about how you could implement what it is that I'll share with you. That is what I want to do for you today. Okay, so, well, we'll see if you take, whoever takes me up. You know, that's the real challenge here, isn't it? So, let's get started. I have 4 discussions. Actually, the 4th discussion isn't going to be a lot of a discussion. I've just kind of taken care of that. Although I'm going to point you to some direction, give you some things, some resources and so forth. But really 3 discussions there. Let's see where it takes us here. Let's talk first about this challenge that it's not effective to just train. Now, I use the word just carefully. You know, I'm an instructional designer. There is nothing more beautiful to me than when you have the right methodology and the right instruction and learners fit into that and they dance beautifully. That is just a wonderful thing to see. The problem is, in the 40 years that I've been after this, it's more like a wrestling match than a dance in most instances. And I want to talk about that just a little bit through the making of 5 points. First, there are 5 moments of learning need. Now, this was a discovery that I made just right out of graduate school. a long time ago. I had been trained in how to design for the moment of learn new. I had been Gagnéd and Maggard and everything else that instructional design could offer, and I knew how to design a learning experience. But what I found as I entered the real world was that there were other moments. One of them was the moment of apply. This is, if you can't win there, if at the end of the day, whatever you design and learn new and even in learning more about things, if at the moment of apply people can't really perform, then what you've done is a waste of effort. And life is too important, and the work that you do is too important to not have effectiveness at the moment of apply. And then at that moment of apply, I learned that there were two other moments within the moment of apply. See, apply is a time where I have to take whatever it is that I learned in a learning event. I have to wait for that moment of time in which it's called for. And then I have to remember it and then adapt and adjust and integrate it with whatever experience I have to meet that challenge of the moment of apply. That is not a small challenge, is it? And much of what you're talking about today is about how do we do that? And you're struggling, I think, with the reality that sometimes that moment of apply is a wrestling match and not a beautiful dance. And so the moment of apply, moment of change. We heard a bit about change. This challenge of when we do things again and again and again, they become automated. And then we ask somebody to unlearn that. The most approaches to unlearning to relearn don't work very well because you cannot train enough to override skills that have become automated. Really, you can't train enough. It really requires you to have some means of reaching into the flow of work and supporting people as they come up to those moments in which they need to perform in a new way rather than the old way in which they have automated. You've got to have that capability, really, to override automated skills effectively and efficiently. And then the moment of solve, when things go wrong. I don't know about you, but you don't want a lot of that, things going wrong, but they do, don't they? And so we have to have design solutions that not only work effectively at the moment of learning something new, or at the moment of learning more about something, which is a little different, but we've also got to be able to have solutions that address the moment of apply and the moment of change and the moment of solve. These are the 5 moments of learning need. And unless our solutions accommodate all of those or take into consideration all of those, we really don't have a complete learning and performance solution. And we will be challenged with failure and with lack of people really performing in the ways that they need to perform. We'll be living with some of the challenges that you're trying to address here at this conference. So, there are 5 moments of learning need. Point number 1. Any questions? Does that make sense? Yeah, good. It's a framework to be thinking about. Second point, there are 3 key learning environments: on the job, while in the process of performing and meeting the everyday work that you do. Now, really, I'd like to ask a question of all of you to think about here. If you look at these 3 environments, while you do your work, collaboratively working with others, or when you stop work to go to an event to learn, what are the percentages in terms of where your competency, your capacity to be competent in your profession, what's the percentages for you? Just think for a minute. What percentage of your own skill development occurs in each of these areas? And then Somebody share what you think that is for you. So let's do percentages. So what percentage? Is it 50% B or 70%? So it could be 10% A and 40% B, and what? It should add up to 100. Yeah.
I'll say 50, 30, 20.
50?
50 for A, 30 for B, and 20 for C.
Okay, 50, 30, 20. Who has one? Yes, just loud.
Yeah, 30, 35, 35.
Okay, we're very balanced. Yes.
20, I know, right?
20, 60, 20. Very. 50, 40, 10. Okay. Do we have one over there? Oh, yes. I'm sorry, the light is...
70 for A, 70 to 80, then 10 for B. Yeah, then 5 for...
There is this very crazy study that was kind of not a very impressive study conducted in the United States. We do a number of those. And it was a study that was where some business guys were asking the question, so what percentage of your learning happens in the workflow versus collaboratively versus in training? And they came up with this 70-20-10, which is, have you heard 70-20-10? Anyone heard that? It's a formula that's being used to just simply talk about the fact that I didn't mean to go there yet. There. This is a formula that is being bantered about. But what I want you to see is, for all of us, it could be a little bit different. But what's important to understand is that we learn in all three of these environments. And so our solution not only needs to be a 5 moments solution, but it needs to be a 5-moment solution that accommodates these environments. That's very important for us to understand. So, point number 3. This is where I could start to get in trouble, especially when we have wonderful individuals who build for that 10, that classroom event. But I'm here to suggest that real learning happens in the flow of work. That's where we integrate our skills. That's where we draw upon previous experience and take the experience that we have in learning and truly integrate it into something that is magnificent and wonderful called skills and competency and capacity. And while people are doing their work, we really have to learn at all 5 moments, really. How many of you have been doing your work? You don't have time to go take a class, but you need to learn something. Anyone here been there? Yeah. And it might be new, or it might be learning more about something, but you've got to learn. Well, that happens in the flow of work. So all of this, real learning happens while people are doing their work. This was Sir William Osler, a great Canadian, changed the way medicine was, or where the course of medical training in North America, at least, and with this observation. Nobody here would challenge that, would you? You would? Well, our son, I mentioned our son. I mentioned our son is a pediatrician. I watched his journey toward competent performance as a pediatrician, and it looked like this. It started with very in-depth, formal learning, knowledge-based understanding, foundational understanding, a very important part of the journey. But as he moved through his journey of training, he began to learn at the bedside, that is, in the flow of medicine and medical treatment. That's where most of you have who are trained medically, right? I have a nephew who was hit in the face by a baseball on New Year's a couple of years ago, about 100 miles an hour. A doctor had to rebuild his face. That doctor was not just fresh out of some class. He had a tremendous amount of experience, thank goodness, that he drew upon, as well as his training, to be able to rebuild his faith. And so it is. And so what I want you to see is what happens. Why is that yellow, that gold, so important? Because it is, isn't it? Really? And if we're in training, if our job is to develop training and performance solutions, then we have to pay attention to learning in the workflow as well as learning out of the workflow. Don't we? Yeah. It has to be a part of our discipline, a part of what we do. Let me share with you 4 reasons why the workflow is really the optimum place to learn as long as you can fail safely. Now, I've got that little nuance there. It is a brilliant learning environment, the workflow. Why? Because I have context, real context in the flow of work, legitimate context. And that is powerful. It's not a made-up context. It's the real thing. I have engagement because I'm needing to do something. I have, right at the moment of apply, I have a need to be able to do something. And so engagement is high in the workflow. Reinforcement, it's here where I do it again and again in the workflow. I integrate those skills. It's spaced over time. It is also validated. When I perform and it works well, I have immediate validation in the context of the real world. And finally, the integration of skills. This is a place where instructional design and training development has failed miserably. In cognitive theory and behavioral psychology, we have taken things apart and we break things down into little pieces. I just taught a workshop for a major accounting firm, a 2-day workshop on micro-learning, on helping them develop their micro-learning strategy, which is, and figure out how to take all of their courseware and break it up into micro-learning pieces so that they can do spaced learning and all the things that we've heard about today. But what I shared with them was a little nursery poem about Humpty Dumpty. Are you familiar with Humpty Dumpty? You see, if you break Humpty Dumpty up into lots of little pieces, learners have to figure some way to put him back together again. And we often train in lots of little things, but in the real world of work, in the real world of doing, you have to integrate them. And integrated practice doesn't happen a lot. It should. I think you talked about it today. You know, integrated practice is a vital part. The workflow is the ultimate place for integrated practice. But we've got to enable it. We've got to have some means to safely and carefully allow that to happen. But this is a great learning environment as long as you can learn safely. And that there's a mechanism to protect against those moments in time where failure could be significant to catastrophic. I'm going to give you the ability to do that today. That's one of the gifts I'm going to give you. So, point 4, collaborative learning. I'm a real believer in it. Here's what we've observed over the years, that collaborative, the whole world of collaborative learning. And that is that social media tools have real power at the moments of change and solve. Those are the moments in time where things need to change, or where I need to learn a new way of doing something. I've got to unlearn to relearn, or I've got to solve a challenge where I can collaborate with others in solving that. It's more challenging to orchestrate learning for collaborative learning to learn new, because people tend to be what we talked about today, which is they can be unconsciously incompetent, right? They could not know. I looked at a study once of nurses to the degree in which they confidently held misinformation. Confidently held misinformation. And the world of medicine changes, does it not? And so when you have knowledge and skills that are internalized, and yet you're changing protocols, you're changing, and knowledge evolves, then you've got to be able to adapt for that. And so it's in the moments of change and solve that collaborative learning truly justifies itself from a cost justification. It's not to suggest that you can't learn collaboratively. You just have to make sure that you're learning collaboratively from people who really are competent to be helping me learn. That's the challenge. How are you doing? I'm just kind of talking to you, but I hope it's helpful. Then there's this mighty 10 that is very important. But I want to make a distinction between learn new and learn more. My son, we have another son who's a landscape architect. He asked me the other day to go with him to pick up some trees. He loves trees. He's a landscape architect. And we went to his business, and he jumped in this huge truck. I said, have you ever driven one of these before? He said, never. I said, really? This is like an expensive piece of equipment. He says, if you've driven one truck, you've driven them all. So we got in it, and sure enough, he just generalized, right? He had to figure out a couple of things. But we drove to pick up the trees, and then he jumped in this very expensive machine that lifts trees. I said, have you ever driven one of those? No, this will be really a lot of fun. I've never been in one. Well, do you know what you're doing? Well, I've driven other things like it. What he was doing was he was in a learn more mode, which is done very well in the flow of work as long as you have a job aid or a little bit of help to figure a few things out, which is what he did. See, learn more happens when I have context, real context, to help me generalize. It allows me to move more quickly to the learning process. And the models for learning more is very different than the model for learning new. So, point 5. There are justifiable reasons for stopping work to learn. Isn't that good to know? Years ago, I was on Trafalgar Square in London, and I stepped into a bookstore. I'm addicted to books. I love books. I stepped into this bookstore, and I found a series of books, Learn in a Weekend. There were about 10 of them. Learn to scuba dive in a weekend was one of them. I got on the plane. I opened this book, Learn to Scuba Dive in a Weekend. I'm from the Rocky Mountains. I thought, well, I want to scuba dive. So I opened the page. I opened the book to one page, and it has this word. I didn't understand this word, but in parentheses it said, burst lungs. And I began to wonder if I wanted to learn to scuba dive in a weekend on my own through a self-instructional manual. Now, there were some things and there was another book on learn to play chess in a weekend. I could lose chess and be okay. I lose my queen, I lose my queen. I lose the game, I lose the game. But in learn to scuba dive, there are some things maybe that I could learn on my own, but there were other things that I wouldn't want to. That changed me in my world of instructional design. And I began to look at what I call the critical impact of failure. What you see here is part of that rating scale that I'm going to share with you. It's the top end of that scale, where it's significant to catastrophic. What I've come to know and understand is when there are skills that are 5, 6, and 7 and critical impact of failure, those, you don't take a chance on just tossing somebody into the workflow and saying, learn it. You want to pull them away. But if you have skills that are not that, we'll do a little activity in just a bit, then the workflow becomes a place where you can turn them to if you give them some means to learn as they do their job. More to come on that. So, let's see where your organization is in terms of mindset. Just read down through there. Now this, I'm sure all of you are on the B side, right? But where is your organization? Yeah, A or B side of that red line. It's very difficult to move to the B side unless you have a mechanism to allow you to move there. And traditional learning models don't enable the B side. Traditional learning models and traditional learning methodology enables the A side. But I'm suggesting to you today that our learning solutions need to accommodate all 5 moments of learning need. They need to allow us to enable learning in those 3 areas of the workflow, collaboratively in the workflow as I do my work, collaboratively in the workflow, and then when it makes sense to step away from the workflow, when the critical impact of failure merits it, to learn. But then we give folks what they need to help them learn across all of that. And we need to build B solutions, not A. So how are you feeling about this? Is this resonating or am I offending you? Or is this okay? Anyone here going, well, it's nice, it's a nice thought, but how in heaven's name do I do this? Right? Yeah. Well, let's see what we can do here. Discussion 2. This is kind of fun. We can learn faster and forget less. I loved the review that we had this morning from last year. That you could be the smartest person on planet Earth and still not remember what Allison Rossett talked about last year. It was job aids, if you know Allison. But what she said, and so we reviewed. It was a good thing to do. So, Atul Gawande, this is a great book. Who's read it? Yeah, he's remarkable. But he observed this. Does that describe your world? Yeah. Anyone disagree with that? Okay. So let me make it even more complex. The red here is a training event. You all have learned how to build and develop remarkable reds. But the challenge of those reds is this, this is mastery. This is where we would like everyone to be. Learners pay different levels of attention, right? So they fall along this scale of mastery. Some of them get to here. Very few get to all the way to the top. Is that fair to say? And then the forgetting curve happens. The forgetting death spiral. The Ebbinghaus effect. Right? I think I pronounced his name right. Close. This is what happens. No matter how effective, no matter how brilliant the instructional design, whatever we train people to do, the minute that that event is over, whether it's an e-learning event or it's a classroom event, whatever it is, no matter how remarkable the trainer is, people forget. They forget, and it happens quickly. And most organizations don't have a strategy for fixing that. They build for the red and hope for the best when it comes to transfer. And furthermore, once you've transferred, so folks have to work and fight and figure out and get from mastery to real competent performance on the job. That's where whatever they learned is integrated with their current skill set and with experience to where they can really perform competently. And then you've got the challenge of now I'm in the workflow, competent, but things change. And this is where the discipline of performance support becomes a very important element for learning. Because a 5-moment solution is a solution that is a learning and performance support solution. It's where you design for the moment of apply first. You identify what it is that people need to be able to do, what they need to know in order to do it effectively, and then you figure from that, you design your performance support solution around that, and then using critical skills analysis, you back into learn new and learn more. Thank you. That's a little different way. So let's talk a little bit more. That was, we can learn faster. When we do this, one of the great realities that we've stumbled across is that when you design for the moment of apply first, and you use critical skills analysis to determine what it is that you then train on when you pull people away, that we see a reduction on the average about 50% of what it requires time away from work to learn. And that reduction allows us to then invest the resources in the performance support. So, discussion 3. We can accomplish more in less time. 3 points to worry about. Wasted work time. Wasted work time is when people are trying to figure it out rather than actually doing the work. Does that happen? Yeah, it does. Yeah. This right here is a picture of that crazy guy that went 130,000 feet in the air and then jumped out, the Red Bull. Anyone remember that nutty guy? What is this on the side of his little capsule right there? Those were checklists. He had somebody talking to him in his ear, and then he had these checklists that he went through. That's called performance support. Performance support is a discipline. And there are many ways in which within that discipline we can build performance support solutions. But it is a discipline that does this. Now, those up here, what you see in all that list, are performance support kinds of things. But just because you have them does not mean that you have this. This is an important understanding. Just adding a job aid does not necessarily make it where you have just what I need at my moment of need to be able to get the job done. And in reality, oftentimes we have to orchestrate these. This is where a remarkable lady by the name of Gloria Geary gave us a great gift. Gloria talked about performance support, and she said, yeah, there are job aids. Yeah, there's online help for software. But she said, in the flow of work, in the workflow, we have to consider something called an EPSS, what I call a digital job coach. It's a job coach that does this. It's a digital job coach, an EPSS, embedded performance support solution, that does that. It's an orchestrated set of technology-enabled services that provides on-demand access to that stuff to enable high-level job performance. Now, I can't teach you how to build this. I have two gifts that I'm going to give you today, and then I'm going to point you in some important directions. Okay? I'm going to give you some performance support, both digitally and in other ways. I was going to show you some examples, but I can't seem to work with technology, which is one of the challenges of technology, right? That is the powerful solution and that organizations are building today. And they follow within the orchestration of those resources. We have developed something called the pyramid principle. A pyramid principle is this. It's where you have increasing levels of support. At the very top of the pyramid is where you identify the various contextual ways in which people need to get to the resources that they need to get to. So one of the most important contextual ways for people to get to those resources is according to how they do their job. How they do their job. See, one of the things that we talked about earlier today was the need for mental models, right? Do you remember that discussion? So let me ask you this question. Would you mind reciting the letters of the alphabet backwards by every third letter right now? Go.
Oh,
no. Why is that hard to do? Why is it hard to recite the letters of the alphabet backwards by every third letter? Because you learned it another way, right? Right. You learned it another way. We do this in training all the time. We design training in one way, and yet people on the job are needing to take that and translate that into their own workflow. But we don't train them according to their work. We don't train them according to their job. We train them in categories and other ways. But when you design for the moment of apply, what you do is you figure out their job. And you create a mental map, if you will, a visual, a cognitive map of that organization for their job. And then you train them to that map. And you build your performance support around that map. Those of you who, all of you, I'm going to give you a little tool that's going to help you learn more about that. But that's just one point. We've got to train according to that. So we identify the contextual ways in which you need to get to a job task. Now, a job task is simply something that I need to be able to do. It can be procedural. It can be a task that is a supervisory task that is less procedural and more principle-based. But it's a performance, something that I've got to do. And I get to that, and I within 2 clicks, 10 seconds, can get to any of the things that I need to be able to do. And then from that doing, whether it's a checklist for me to follow, or a set of steps for me to follow, or some guiding principles for me to follow, 2 clicks, 10 seconds, I get to that. Then from there, I should be able to get to supporting knowledge, or get to reference resources, policies, guidelines, or get to the other kinds of things down here, learning resources, down to even people resources. But I can move down into those resources as it makes sense. So every performance support solution, you organize according to this pyramid, where I create, at the top of that pyramid, I have my contextual ways in which I access this. And then I move down into that as quickly as I can to the information that will help me know how to perform. And then from there to the things that I need to understand to perform, or I can move from there to the things that I need to support me as I do that, or the things that I need to learn to do that, and so forth. Does that make sense? So already, I'm doing to you what I'm telling you we should never do. I'm telling you a lot of things. One of the lessons, I'm the chief learning strategist at our company, and so I move in and help organizations with strategy. And one of the things that we do in strategy is we disrupt your current beliefs. We share ideas that kind of are disruptive. That's the first step in strategy. Am I being disruptive a little bit? Good. I intended. I want to be disruptive. But then I've got to give you some guidance and help in bringing some order to that. And I'm doing a little bit of that. But I've got a tool that I'm going to give you, a performance support tool, that will allow you to actually step in and explore more and figure this out and get to some examples and other things. Point 8, we can reduce wasted training time. That's when we unnecessarily pull people away from their work to learn. I've already talked about that a bit. That's an interesting idea, I think, to reduce that. So we have relied on training as the only way in which we can enable people to be skilled. When in reality, we can actually learn, people can actually learn while they do their job. If we have performance support that within 2 clicks, 10 seconds I can get to, all the resources that I need to guide me in actually performing that skill, doing that thing that I need to be able to do. If within 2 clicks and 10 seconds I can get to that and I have the pyramid to help me with that, then I can learn as long as I can make a mistake and recover from it. How many of you here have learned from a mistake? Yeah, it's a very powerful learning as long as the consequences of failure are not horrific, right? Catastrophic. That's not a good way to learn. I hope none of you have had to do that. That's a terrible way to learn. But when you make a mistake, our son, the one who is the landscape architect, when he was just 21, he said to my wife and me, he said, "Why don't you come with me? I'm going to go lease a truck." And Yvonne said, "You got to stop him. That's the stupidest thing in all the world for him to do." I said, "It's going to cost him $4,000 and he'll learn." And we're just going to let him learn from his mistake. And a year later, when he had put twice the miles on the truck than his lease would allow him, he learned, and it cost him about $4,000. And today, he's a great trader when it comes to vehicles because he learned from that mistake. We learn a lot from that. So on the job collaboratively, as we're working together, as long as we have a support infrastructure to help us there, as well as a support in the same way that we have a support infrastructure to help us here. And that's where performance support and on-the-job digital coach and EPSS can help us with all of that. Now, along this point, I've talked about how the workflow is a remarkable place for us to learn. And here are 2 very important principles that we believe. One is that we should push learning as deeply into the flow of work while people are doing their job as we possibly can. And if you look at the bottom here, of this. This is in the flow of work. This is outside of the flow of work. And secondly, we need to enable learning while people do their work of the organization. That is, it's not enough just to give somebody access to e-learning, although that's a very important thing to do, or a small little learnlet, or a learning burst. Those can be helpful, but I still stop work to learn. What's helpful is if I can get to, through performance support, actually learn while I do my work. Now, earlier today, we heard from the review of Allison, that sometimes performance support isn't something that you want to be reviewing. If I'm with a patient right now and I'm needing to, some guidance on how to give an injection, and I'm reading through the instructions. Although I had a person who was just learning that I wish she had had a job aide once give me an injection. I would have preferred it. But Allison also talks about something called a planner versus a sidekick. A sidekick is when you can have it right there with you, guiding you, directing you as you do it, that it's okay. But a planner is where, I'm going to step in with a patient right now, 2 clicks, I can review it, look at it, get to whatever I need to, and then I can step into a patient. You see, it's a planner. I have the support that I need, but at least I'm not relying on something that I learned 6 months ago and I haven't reviewed it at all. I can get to what I need to help me be able to step in. I once had a young man who was filling in for my doctor, who clearly was green at the gills. And he said, "Excuse me." He was talking, "Excuse me," and he left. And I told my wife, he's going to go look something up. Clearly, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to go look something up. But I was glad he did. I wanted him to, with all of that. So what does that mean? Well, look, the red, that's what we've been building for a long, long time. And look how far away it is from the flow of work and as we do the work of the organization. What you see down here in the bottom left-hand side, this is where we need to figure out how to do these things. We've had on-the-job coaching. You have that, right? On-the-job coaching. You've got that. But that's tough to scale and to manage and to implement. But what I'm suggesting to you is this, that a workflow EPSS can be a digital coach if you design it right. It can do much of what an on-the-job coach can do. It can, and there are remarkable technologies available that can offer this up in a handheld, a mobile device, and actually print out even quick guides that you need. There's a way to get to this. I want you to know that and to understand that. So, here's the scale. This is the one gift. So as you move through your instructional design, as you identify the skills, the procedures, the skills, the other kinds of things that you've learned about today, take a minute and use this scale. It's not about how important things are. Everything's important. It's about the critical impact of failure. What is the impact if someone fails in the workflow? And there are many things that we train people on where they can make a mistake and learn if they can recover, and we have a tool to allow that to happen. Okay? Gift number 1. This, EPSS with training, this, you can use your EPSS and learn in the workflow. That's something for you to consider. Now, I want you to do something right now at your table. I'd like you to look through this list of job tasks. Here, caring for yourself, we've got the patient and the family. And I'd like you to identify any of those tasks that would be a 5, 6, or 7 on here. Okay? Just take a minute and identify which ones you think would be a 5, 6, or 7. This is my effort at involving you in some way, engaging your thinking. I'd like you to talk at your table just a little bit, because here's what I know. When I do this, I have subject matter experts, but there's sometimes a disagreement. But sometimes when that is talked through, they can give the reason, your subject matter experts can give the reason of why they would rate it one way or the other way, and then you get to the best answer. So just take a minute here, a couple of minutes, and talk it through. All right, did you find any? Any 5s? Any 5s? 6s? 7s? I have 5 minutes. That's my 5. Any 5, 6s, or 7s? Take the medication. That you would think that might be a 5, 6. Yeah. A 7? Good. Watch TV? Maybe. Yeah. Any other 5, 6s, or 7s? Manage pumps. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. The point is, this is from a real project. And you see, in the old days, they would have developed training for everything. But with the world of performance support, what you can do is you can build your performance support solution and then target those critical skills in the learning. One last thing I want to share with you, point 9. Betsy Sparrow is doing some amazing research, and her research is suggesting that the internet is changing how we learn. That in reality today we are learning to actually rely on where information is stored. That is, we're willing to forget things that we're confident that we can find somewhere. I used to call my wife anytime I needed a phone number, because she's really smart and she remembers those. She's been working over the years to get me to just simply rely on a performance support tool called my phone with contact information. I've gotten pretty good at it, but I don't have to remember those numbers. We forget things that we're confident we can immediately find elsewhere, and then we are better able to remember where we find something than we are remembering the information itself. So that has real impact on this world of performance support. Selective forgetting frees up cognitive load for higher level processing. Yeah. So, I'd like you to ask yourself this question. What is the level of risk for the initiatives if you fail to embrace the discipline of performance support? I know that there are challenges, but I'm suggesting to you that unless you have a 5-moment solution that can address, train, transfer, and sustain, that you've got a challenge ahead of you. Maybe you're living that challenge now. I have put together some resources. One of them is we have a community of about 3,500 people from all over the world who are part of what we call the performance support community. And they are really remarkable members of this community that help and assist each other in working through the journey of performance support. And all you need to do is go to performersupport.com, and you'll click on a link, and it's by invitation only. That's just so that we can make sure that you don't get approached by marketing folks. So you can come in and join that. We have webinars and other things and resources there. We also have put together we have a methodology around all of this. And Janine is back here, has put together a reference tool that for you, and will provide you that link. It's a link that will allow you to get into that performance support tool. And we'll make that available to everyone so you can get into that. It's really an EPSS, but we haven't turned on all of the content in that EPSS. But I will turn it on to the degree that you need it, based upon if you decide that these things that we've talked about would be helpful for us to have some discussions around it. Okay, my desire is to help you be effective and to help you succeed. It has access right now to a lot of articles and resources. One of them is a white paper that we just finished on mobile learning. Another is an article that I wrote with the Vancouver Island Health Authority on how we brought performance support into their hospital system in Vancouver, on Vancouver Island, and some other articles there. So you can get into that. And then lastly, let me help you if I can. It's a delight in being here. You're about, as I mentioned to you, a great work. Thank you for listening, letting me at least share with you the passion that I have over the 5 moments of learning neat. God bless all of you and the mighty work that you're doing. Thank you.